Evelyn Thompson always thought of herself as a smart and independent woman. She did well at school, and by the time she graduated, she knew that she was certainly going to pursue a degree in economics. Evelyn didn't have a problem getting into a university, thus becoming a freshman there. However, that was when she started having problems, which were mostly caused by the negative attitude of some of the other students. Henry, Michael, and Dylan all had rich parents who accustomed their kiddos to luxury and prosperity from an early age. The three young men knew each other even before they started university, so when they also started studying together, they became simply inseparable. The trio quickly subjugated all the other students, making them all potential victims of their bullying. Michael, Henry, and Dylan forced the other students to endure ridicule that they did nothing to deserve. The young men had money and expensive cars that emphasized their high status. The trio managed to put down almost everyone in their entire year, and only Evelyn Thompson did not succumb to their pressure. She was well aware that they made fun of anyone they didn't like, making their unfortunate victims look bad in front of the rest of the students. Therefore, Evelyn tried to be on the alert at all times, making sure that she didn't give them any reason for ridicule. The young woman's appearance made it obvious that she didn't grow up in a wealthy family, which the evil trio didn't let slide. Evelyn dressed modestly and probably bought her clothes at a thrift store. Nevertheless, the young woman was always happy and cheerful. Moreover, she wasn't afraid of the attacks of the rich trio and tried to ignore their malicious comments. The very fact that someone dared to stand up to them unspeakably annoyed Michael, Henry, and Dylan, and they never failed to express their annoyance by bullying their classmate even more. The young men wanted to break her will and make her a laughingstock in the eyes of everyone else. They knew that Evelyn's mother worked as a school librarian, and her father was a retired Marine who lost his leg during a special operation in one of the countries of the East. As the young man saw it, Evelyn lived in poverty and had nothing to show for herself. "I'm sure they barely make enough money for food, trying to save every cent to pay for their daughter's university," Michael said with a sneer. "I'm sure you're right. Only some small-town beggar could dress like that," Henry echoed. The trio were still upset by the fact that Evelyn paid absolutely no attention to them. Their jokes seemed dull and rather idiotic, especially in contrast with Evelyn's ingenious comebacks, which only infuriated the young men even more. Henry, Michael, and Dylan tried all their tricks, but none of them worked on Evelyn. She didn't only manage to keep her composure at all times, but was also getting more and more respect from the other students. It was then that Michael came up with an interesting idea, which his friends liked a lot. "Let's invite her to a party, shall we?" Dylan gave his friend an annoyed look and said, "Yeah, right. Don't you get enough of this beggar at school? Do you want to see her around after the classes too? No, thank you. I'm sick of her as it is." Michael smiled enigmatically and continued, "No, you don't get it. We'll invite her to this special party, okay? We'll only invite the rich kids from the wealthiest families." "Ah, okay, I'm starting to get it now. And we'll invite this beggar so she'll look completely out of place there and feel like a fool." Dylan was the first one to guess. Michael nodded approvingly and gave him a thumbs up. He knew that Evelyn would come to the party wearing her usual clothes and would look like a real scarecrow around all the rich kids. Having approved Michael's plan, the young men set out to implement it. For starters, the trio needed to get Evelyn to let her guard down by making her believe that they had come to terms with her independence. Next, they chose the venue for the party. It was going to be the house of Dylan's parents, because it was the best suited for such purposes. Leaving Evelyn alone for a while, the young men laid low, waiting for the right time. Finally, the opportunity came along when Dylan's parents went to the countryside for the weekend. "Haha, well, it's showtime. It was your idea, now go ahead and do it," Henry urged Michael. Putting on a serious face, the young man set out to catch Evelyn in between classes. "Hey, what are you doing tonight? Oh, would you like to come to our party? We've invited almost the entire freshman year," Michael asked casually. Evelyn raised an eyebrow in surprise and gave the young man an appraising look. Having made sure that Michael wasn't kidding, the woman relaxed visibly. Evelyn felt that the young men were up to one of their tricks, but she couldn't figure out what exactly it was. Eventually, the young woman weighed all the pros and cons and decided to accept the invitation. The last thing Evelyn wanted was to be known as the coward who was afraid to go to some party. She took our bait. It was even easier than I expected. Well, let the fun begin. Also, I was thinking we should film the party, to have a keepsake, so to say, to make sure that this lowly beggar would never forget this shame until the end of her life, Henry exclaimed. His words made the trio burst into laughter, feeling all too excited for the upcoming party. Evelyn, on the contrary, was very calm and showed no sign of anxiety. At the time when the party was supposed to start, expensive cars started arriving at Dylan's house. Rich kids couldn't pass up the opportunity to have a good time and unwind after the difficult school week. Thus, they were all very eager to accept Dylan's invitation. The house was slowly filling up with well-dressed young people who were determined to have a blast. Michael checked his watch every now and then, looking forward to Evelyn's arrival. At some point, Henry even suggested that she might have changed her mind and wasn't going to come. Time passed, but Evelyn still hadn't showed up. The trio was about to accept the fact that the young woman had played them when an expensive Bentley pulled up in front of the house. "Whoa, who could that be?" Michael asked in surprise. "I don't know. I don't think I invited him," Dylan answered with a shrug. The door swung open and Evelyn Thompson stepped out of the car. The woman was wearing an expensive evening dress and high heels. A miniature purse was hanging off the woman's shoulder, emphasizing her elegant attire. Turning to the driver, the woman said, "Thanks, Dad. I'll give you a call when I'm ready to go home." At that time, the trio exchanged meaningful glances. "Dad? I thought that her father was some alcoholic Marine without a leg." "This clearly isn't him," Michael said in surprise. "Isn't that Alfred Thompson, the one who owns several car dealerships in the city? My dad said that he has a limp. Maybe that's because of the prosthesis," Henry whispered, amazed at his own discovery. The guests at the party greeted Evelyn with smiles and joyful exclamations. They saw her as one of their own, and nothing could convince them otherwise. Of course, Henry, Michael, and Dylan didn't know Evelyn's story, which began long before the events of that evening. And it began with the fact that a few years ago, a Marine named Alfred Thompson was injured during a combat mission in one of the countries of the East. Their unit was passing through a gorge when they were ambushed by the enemy. Despite the fact that the Marines managed to fight off the attack, many of them were injured. Alfred Thompson happened to be one of them. In the heat of the battle, the man stepped on an anti-personnel mine set by the enemy. Unfortunately, the young man's leg couldn't be saved. Having returned to civilian life, Alfred faced a series of problems caused by his injury. Alfred's fiancée didn't want to spend her life with a disabled person and left the man shortly before he was discharged from the hospital. Needless to say, the unfortunate Marine was devastated. The young man realized that his life as he knew it was over. It would never be the same again. Alfred's parents died when their son was 5 years old, and therefore there was simply no one to help him through this tough time. Trying to find solace at the bottom of a whiskey bottle, the former Marine quickly found himself hitting rock bottom. Alfred could have lost his life at any moment, but fate favored the former military man and saved him from even greater hardships. Having pulled himself together, he tried to start his life anew, and the main reason for it was a young woman named Amanda. Feelings between the young people developed so suddenly that they were both caught off guard. Amanda, like Alfred, was an orphan and understood him perfectly. It was she who helped the young man master the prosthesis and return to normal life. Alfred got a job and joined the Combat Veterans Association. At that time, Amanda was already his wife and did everything to ensure that peace and comfort always reigned in their home. The only problem the young family faced was the fact that they couldn't get pregnant. Amanda and Alfred underwent countless medical tests, but they were all inconclusive. Doctors shrugged, suspecting some genetic disorder that could cause infertility. At that time, medicine wasn't as advanced yet, and unfortunately, artificial insemination wasn't yet available to everyone. At some point, having gotten tired of the series of unsuccessful attempts, the couple decided to adopt. And they would have probably done so if Alfred hadn't come across a 7-year-old girl on the street one day. The little girl stood by the supermarket entrance and begged for alms, holding out a paper cup to the passers-by. There were tears in her eyes, and that made Alfred feel very sorry for her. The ex-Marine stepped closer and reached into his pocket to scoop out all the change he had. "That's very kind of you, but it's too much. You should keep it," the little girl muttered, lowering her eyes timidly. "Take it, dear. Please take it. I've lived on the street once too. I know what it's like. What is your name? And where are your parents? Your dad? Mom?" Alfred asked, trying to sound as casual as possible. The girl hesitated for a moment and then said, "My name is Evelyn, sir. My mom died a year ago, and I never knew my dad. I live with my stepfather now, but all he does is drink." Alfred's heart sank. He couldn't help but feel sorry for this little girl, who found herself in such a difficult situation. After telling Amanda about her, Alfred suggested that they could try getting custody of her. "I don't think Evelyn's stepfather wants her, but if he tries to intervene, I'll just have to have a serious talk with him," summed up the former Marine. Fortunately, there were no problems with the custody, and a month later, Evelyn moved in with her new family. Now she no longer had to wander the streets and beg for money. Alfred and Amanda surrounded the girl with such care and attention that she'd never known before. Time went by. Alfred Thompson confidently climbed up the career ladder, which allowed him to save up enough to start his own business. Having become a successful businessman by the age of 50, the former Marine did everything to ensure that his family was never in need of anything. At the same time, Alfred taught his daughter to work hard and respect her elders. Both of these principles were fundamental in the girl's upbringing. Thanks to her adoptive parents, Evelyn managed to build up her self-esteem and got rid of the fears that she'd suffered from as a child. And now, having arrived at Dylan's party, she felt like she owned the situation. She acted as if the evil trio didn't exist at all, and their nagging didn't bother her any more than a mosquito bite. Evelyn knew that Henry, Dylan, and Michael were deliberately luring her into a trap, and therefore she struck first and arrived at the party in all of her glory. Inadvertently, the rich trio themselves became the object of ridicule, and that hurt them a lot. While Evelyn danced and chatted with the guests, Henry, Michael, and Dylan stood aside and felt left out at their own party. Moreover, the end of the night was ruined completely when Dylan's parents returned home at the most inopportune moment. Upon learning that Evelyn was the daughter of Alfred Thompson, they immediately expressed their admiration for her father, which further upset the young men. Of course, Michael and his friends couldn't make the compromising video as they'd hoped. Instead of pranking Evelyn, they were the ones that looked like clowns. The rumor about the party at Dylan's house went around the university for a long time, and those who got to attend it were proud of the fact that they'd made friends with Evelyn. Only then did Dylan, Michael, and Henry realize that all this time, the rich young woman was deliberately dressing in simple clothes, thus trying to avoid attracting attention to herself so she could live the life of an ordinary person. Later, the young men apologized to Evelyn and stopped bullying the other students. Now, the three of them had become just like the rest of the ordinary students, who just enjoyed life and hoped for a bright future.